you for joining this session on entrepreneurship. For those of you that are new here, or whether you've joined the session before, welcome to the Migration Summit. For those of you that don't know, it's co-organized by MIT Emerging Talent, Namal and Karam Foundation, and it's a week-long global convening designed to build bridges between diverse communities of displaced learners, universities, companies, social enterprises, policymakers, employers, and governments around the key challenges and opportunities for refugee and migrant communities. The aim of the Migration Summit is to bring together diverse communities and perspectives to drive meaningful dialogue and action. So this year, we're exploring the theme Unlocking and Engaging Talent, Pathways for Dignified Work, where we have a week of virtual events hosted by participating partners around the world. We've already had a fantastic few sessions, and we've got a fantastic few sessions coming up. I'm especially excited for this one, where we've got an incredible panel lined up, starting with a panel discussion and then following on with a fireside chat. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to our moderator for the day, Ousama Sulaiman. He's the founder of Turnsol Technologies. He has an impressive background and has done some incredible work, but I feel like I wouldn't do him justice if I was to introduce him myself. So I'll hand over to Ousama to introduce himself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabella, for the nice introduction. My name is Ousama. I'm from Syria, the founder and lead of Turnsol Technologies. At Turnsol, we aim to integrate refugees into the global tech market by providing them decent job opportunities and providing upskilling and training for refugees. Me, myself, I am a software engineer, started my career in Syria during the war, then moved to Turkey, worked in freelancing, worked in NGO for training for refugees. And then I founded Turnsol, started in Turkey, but then moved to London, pursued my master in social innovation and entrepreneurship at LSE, currently working full-time on Turnsol and like targeting to employ hundreds of refugees in Middle East, with like connecting them with tech startups in the UK and in around the world. So that's me briefly. Thank you so much for like you being here and for inviting me to this event.
Thank you, Ousama. Can also move to Dalton, if you can introduce yourself. We're looking forward to know more also about Amplio Ventures and the work you will be present in this session.
Absolutely. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Dalton Simmons of Amplio Ventures. Our organization invests in refugee-owned businesses that employ refugees, or they create products and services that aid with refugees. I come at this after years in entrepreneurship. My partners and I formed Main Street Technologies in 1999, and it was acquired in 2018. And during that time, through associations with other people, became aware of refugee issues and situations and wanted to do something about this in this part of my life and my career. So applying my experience in entrepreneurship and then also attending Harvard. I've been working on a master's degree in international relations so I can better understand what's going on internationally and globally, not just in the causes of refugee situations, but also in possibly how best to help in the intent to do no harm instead of my normal fire-ready aim. So I'm about one thesis away from being a social scientist. The other project I've been working on, I've completed the first manuscript of a book called The Refugee Advantage. And this book examines the characteristics that are either developed or revealed during flight that assist refugees in becoming entrepreneurs. And we hope to have that published by the end of the year and available to all. And again, thank you for having me. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Dalton, for the introduction and for explaining your projects and your venture. We'll move to Kenny. Can you please give us a brief introduction about you and your venture, please?
Sure. It's great to be here with you all. I'm really excited about this conversation. So my name is Kenny Clewett. I'm based in Madrid, Spain, and I work for an organization called Ashoka, which is the largest network of social entrepreneurs, leading social entrepreneurs in the world. And within that, I co-lead what we call Hello World, which is our migration and refugee initiative, or initiative for people on the move. And to be, make it very brief, what our aim is to change kind of what we would call the framework or the narrative around migration, from migrants and people on the move being seen in the best case often as objects of pity or compassion, to rather be seen as the change makers they are. So what we talk about is every migrant a change maker, everywhere, all the time, referring to in every step of that process, which I think is something Dalton was referring to a bit. There's so much that they're bringing and connecting society, and also the communities that welcome them. So we support that through a number of things. What we do is we call it Go Wide, which is kind of identifying and bringing up and showing the change making that's happening within the sector, which is very, very important. We do this through like challenges where we kind of identify social entrepreneurs. Like recently, we identified 365 entrepreneurs or change makers that were welcoming refugees across Europe, particularly refugees from Ukraine, but not exclusively. Kind of interviewed them and asked, what are your needs? What are you finding? What are you seeing? We also do accelerators where we help initiatives that are kind of working and successful, tackling some of the issues that emerge from, not from refugees, because refugees are not a problem, or migrants, but often the situation of accommodation or arrival or kind of getting settled. That there's a lot of there's a lot of issues there that we need to deal with. So people that have solutions, we help them to scale. And then we also do what we call Go Deep, which is select, leading social entrepreneurs and migration and help them scale globally. And also what we call ecosystem accelerators, which I'll share a bit more about later, where we basically choose kind of a topic and build a team around that topic of top social entrepreneurs and stakeholders to kind of figure out, how do we solve this? We did one on migrant entrepreneurship in Europe last year that and found like a lot of really interesting things, and some organizations were shaped from that, et cetera. And then finally, what we do is we say we tell the story, which is embedding some of the things that we've learned into policy, particularly, really trying to influence some of the major policy pieces, because that's a huge hurdle in many aspects, and also kind of wider storytelling. So that's just a brief picture of Hello World. I've had the privilege of leading this since it started in Europe in 2016. And just super excited to be here and share a bit of the stories that we're finding.
Thank you so much, Kenny. It's really interesting to see how you can help migrants from different challenges, different dimensions of challenges. We'll move to Walid, Walid Barsali from Bolsequad.
Hey, hello everyone. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Ousama. I'm Walid Barsali. I'm calling in rather from Warsaw. I'm French Algerian, but I'm established in the Central Europe for many years, and I'm a local entrepreneur. Chosen to migrate, right? Haven't been pushed, but still, a migrant, but choose myself to migrate towards Central Europe to, build my career and build my project. So in a nutshell, I basically cover, I have three hats. So the main one is Bolsequad. That's a company that I have founded about a little over 5 years ago. And what we do is that we upcycle public sport facilities to bring them back into the citizens. So whatever is unused in the schools and in the public spaces, we are basically digitizing their management and bringing them back to the public, so they can be used by all the citizens and not only by the schools and the initiated people. And through building my company for the past 5-6 years, I have been confronted with many HR issues, obviously. This is why we are here today. And I decided to go the international way, where everyone else was going local in terms of recruitment and skills and talents. And I believe that's what made me a little bit knowledgeable on that area, on how to build international team, how to find talents, how to make the culture fit to the needs of the performance of the team when they come from different places, don't potentially speak the same languages, or at least their English is not the same, and all that are, I believe, a big benefits that we can basically leverage as entrepreneurs. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing, which is very much linked to that, I'm the president of the French Tech Warsaw organization, which is a French institution in Warsaw that is linking both markets. So my job again is to basically link the Polish tech market and the French tech market. So directly in collaboration with the embassy and other government bodies that are actually, trying to connect those markets. And the third one, which is a rather recent one, but fits into all that, is that also I lead the Founder Institute locally, where I'm basically launching accelerators for pre-seed companies and mostly for founders. So our job is to fund people that want to become entrepreneur and run them through our program for 4 months, squeeze them, because that's entrepreneurship, you get squeezed. And the ones that basically come out the other side, I would say still alive and victorious, then that's the one that we push forward for funding and further support, right? So in a nutshell, that's what I do. And I'm very glad to be here, sharing the stage with you guys.
Thank you so much, Walid. So 3 ventures you're running. I hope you are able to sleep.
Who needs sleep, Ousama? Who needs that?
Like as a migrant, running 3 businesses, that's really difficult. But yeah, welcome. I wanted to welcome the audience also joining us from all over the world for different time zones. So thank you so much for joining us wherever you are. As you can see, we have today like a wealth of expertise in our panel. So I'm expecting exciting discussion. I'll ask the audience also, if you got any question that you wanted to pass to the panel, just drop them in the chat so we can pass them to the panel at the right time. The act of migration, whether it's forced or voluntary, is by itself, it's an act of entrepreneurship itself, sacrifices today for a better of tomorrow. This panel focuses on the aspirations of migrants and refugees motivated and engaged in high growth innovation and large scale problem solving. Our session will engage industry experts, investors, and entrepreneurs as they explore how migrants push financial, infrastructure, and technology expectation, despite outpacing the impact of non-migrant entrepreneurship. We'll be in this panel dive into some topics around innovation, growth, and investment. And then we'll move to a fireside chat with Fadi Bishara to get some insights and reflect on the landscape of future of refugees, refugee entrepreneur, and how local and global economies can benefit from them. I'll start my question to Dalton. Dalton, from your experience in supporting migrant entrepreneurship, can you share some examples of innovative migrant businesses that have created dignified work opportunities for refugees and migrants?
Yeah, absolutely. And last week, we had the opportunity to talk to several entrepreneurs who have been successful in starting businesses and employing not entirely other refugees and migrants, but largely employing from that group. One of the most successful that I can talk about are the Lee brothers, Andrew Lee in San Francisco with Sugar Bowl Bakery. They are Vietnamese refugees that were forced to flee at the end of the Vietnam War with the United States in the late 70s. I believe in 1980, the family arrived in San Francisco, and by 1984, they had purchased a small coffee shop in San Francisco. That's now the largest Asian-owned bakery in the United States. They employ approximately 550 people, and they have some of their original employees still on staff there. They treat the organization and the enterprise much like a family business where everyone that's involved is part of the family. And through our research, we find that this is true with a lot of refugee companies. The employees in the business are extensions of the family. They may start with family members, but as it expands, they just expand their family. The other, there's several other businesses. Lamin Zarad from Azerbaijan has a company in Austin, Texas called Stellify. This is his third startup after 2 successful exits. Lamin has a background in finance. He was also a former bank examiner. And so he understands how credit works for individuals and how certain entrepreneurs and consumers are disenfranchised from the opportunity to borrow money or create, good credit scores. So this latest business is aimed at helping people that are underserved create better credit scores so they'll have access to borrowing funds and lending. And he has been very successful at raising capital. He is quite the extraordinary entrepreneur, but he's not an outlier. He is just one who has been doing this for quite some time, I believe, after arriving in the United States in the early 1990s. We also are working with a company now called Resilient People, and they are training refugees that are continuing to be displaced. They are in a refugee camp in Kenya, and they're training them to work online in business process outsourcing. And the idea here, of course, is to use the available technologies to allow them to earn, some income and learn skills that they could use whenever it might be that they are able to resettle or return home, or for the length of stay they have in the camp. So these are just 3 examples that come off the top of my mind, along with many others we could talk about.
Thank you so much, Dalton. This is really insightful. Examples about innovative migrant businesses, and that would lead us to a question about around also innovation in migrant entrepreneurship that will go to Kenny. Kenny, you worked with migrants to help them scale their businesses. We often talk generally about innovation in entrepreneurship. However, in migrant entrepreneurship, we often see it as a kind of survival businesses. So how can we boost innovation for migrant entrepreneurship to make them more competent in the market from your point of view?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in the ecosystem accelerator we worked on with a number of different organizations, including a couple that work directly with migrant entrepreneurship. In Europe, Startup Migrants is one of them, and Singa is another, which some of you may be familiar with some of these organizations. A couple of things came up kind of around that. The first was we started to kind of realize there's different kinds of entrepreneurs, which means there's different kinds of innovation, which, we all know this, but sometimes you have to say these things out loud. Remember this, right? You have your mom and pop shops, people that set up a fruit shop or something else where there likely is levels of innovation, but really there the need isn't as much coming up with a new fruit or something or a way to sell fruit, or you just need that service. But there's training needed or help needed often to go maybe from a 2-people joint to a 4-person or 5-person. So it's increasing the employment ability, which often comes with learning certain processes or laws or certain things like this, particularly in Europe where everything is so incredibly deeply regulated. But in Latin America, we found something very similar too. It's not as much innovation in the sense of a new gadget or a new thing, but how do we help people or how do people support each other to kind of grow those businesses to where they can reach different parts? Then you have from there, to the unicorn founders that are founding this incredibly powerful business, and where innovation is a factor. But often what we find is the factor isn't as much coming up with the innovation, but communicating the innovation. How do we communicate in this sector that's so filled with messages, et cetera? And, for Ashoka and for Hello World, we work a lot directly with what we call social entrepreneurs. So these are you know, same as a business entrepreneur in the sense of like crazy people that don't sleep a lot, that are looking for solutions to things, that are obsessed with problems, like building stuff, tearing it down, building it again, you know, the entrepreneurial kind of personality, but where their aim is solving a major social problem versus, you know, making money or changing the market, which it is very important in business entrepreneurship. If you don't make money, generally you can't be successful. And when we talk about social entrepreneurship, and I think a lot of this can apply to other things, when we work with these social entrepreneurs to kind of grow their, more than grow their initiative, grow their impact, one thing we spend a lot of time doing is stopping and saying, let's go back and look at what is the impact you want to scale. Not as much what do you want to scale, what's your business or what's the company or what. So many people run to like what they call a social franchise. I need a franchise model where I have this in different places, or I need to build a big foundation that can reach different places. We say, well, why don't we stop for a second? Let's go back and look at what the impact is. And we talk about different levels of impact, right? There's direct impact, like direct service impact, you know, when you're getting fruit to people who need fruit, and sending it to them and packaging food or whatever, to use a weird example. Secondly, you have indirect impact, which is when you have a model that's working, but you start giving it or sharing it with other companies so that it can grow much quicker. So rather than you giving out this food, maybe you're working with different supermarket chains so that they get food to people. Then what we talk about is systemic impact, which means adjusting or changing or tinkering with the system so that it changes, which is like, how do we lower the price of fruit? I'm using this fruit example just to use something, you know, where lower the price of food or give people access to this much more quickly, or change the mindset or the way we collect or sell certain things. And then there's another level, which we call framework change, just changing the way people even think about this issue, right? When you think of the major social gains in society, it often goes through a framework change, like a civil rights movement or feminist movement, et cetera. That's why for us, we did this exercise with ourselves and realized it's great to scale organizations. We need to do that. It's great to influence policies. We need to do that. But the absolute biggest, most important thing to do is to change the mindset around people on the move to be seen as the change makers that they are, which isn't actually making people change makers. I think there are plenty of change makers. Like I'm really excited about Dalton's book, you know, because that's it. There is an advantage in many of these things, whether it comes from a wonderful source or a source of trauma or whatever, that like there's an advantage. That's a reality. But how do we tell that story and show that story and embed it into policies? So for us, as we did that exercise, we're like, how do we scale that impact? And it's not growing as an organization on many more staff necessarily. It's spending a lot more time helping other organizations take that on as a mission, or sharing this information, or you know, bringing some of these pieces to different elements. So I know that wasn't a straightforward answer, but I think those, even with businesses, I think it's similar. Like if we looked at what is we'd often say the bottom line, but it's not the bottom line. Like what's that thing that's really changing stuff? And how do we get it to the right places, rather than just thinking of these very simplified models of franchise or getting big or whatever? I think we found that really helps kind of shake people's mindsets. And when you do that with a group and allow other stakeholders into it, then you go completely crazy, because you start seeing the whole system and realizing that no matter how much I grow and how much I complain about the other guy, that he's not doing his job, like the Red Cross isn't doing their job right, or the government, if they just did their thing right, the problem that we're facing is so much bigger than all these organizations. We need to get together and rethink through the problem again, because I think we all need to change the way we do stuff, not just one organization. So that for me is kind of the big goal beyond individual initiatives.
Absolutely, totally agree with that. So like the mindset shifting is the key for like creating innovation within the context of migrant entrepreneurship. And I think like that also will lead us nicely to the to a question to Walid about the relation between diversity and innovation. So usually, like they say, like diversity will bring innovation. So can you share from your experience how diversity led to solving problems or identifying like new opportunities in the market?
Yeah, great question. To start, like I don't like those big general concepts, right? Like, you know, immigration, you know, are all entrepreneurs. Immigration, you know, they're gonna bring innovation. That's basically what brings innovation, what brings change is the struggle. It's very simple, right? you go from a struggle, and then, you know, you find the solutions, whatever they are, you know, to basically fix that issue that you are facing. And more often than not, you know, the refugees and the migrants are the ones that have the biggest struggle, right? So therefore, they have to innovate in their approach to how they lead their career, you know, how they are basically delivering their projects. Are they being financed or not? And here I'm reverting to some project I had the chance to, you know, I'm spilling the beans here, Kenny, yeah, because we know each other with Kenny, and basically we had the chance to work together on some program dedicated to migrants and refugees and how they could be more supported with financing. So that's also a huge struggle of the migrants or refugees, whatever, you know, you call them, while they are building their careers or their, you know, company. So here it's all a matter of understanding that, just like what Kenny said before, you know, those are the big organizations are there, right, to basically fix the big issues, right, the ones that are the most visible, to get to that lobbying aspect, to, you know, try to change the narrative, right? But this is so slow. That takes so much time, right? And if you want to impact people's life, right, is right now when people move, change, you know, open their company, they change country and whatnot. That's the right now that they have the issue and the struggle. And often their struggle is way too small for those big organizations to take care of it, because they are taking care of that big idea, that big process, right? So basically, from, you know, my approach, but it's a very entrepreneurial approach, is that no one's going to hold your hand and no one is here to, you know, carry you through the finish line, right? So it's about you being able to pound that wall until the wall, you know, say stop and, you know, basically collapse and you go the other side, right? And so it's up to you, if we talk on the entrepreneurial journey and if we talk on the entrepreneurial angle, because that's what I know, right? So I'm not talking about refugees or whatnot that arrive in other contexts. I'm talking about mine. When you arrive as an entrepreneur, your job as an entrepreneur and your key skill is to be able to find the solution, whatever the solution is, right? So it's your job to go look for those, you know, missing points that you don't have, to find the proper crowd that is willing to listen to you, you know, to the proper first early adopters of your product, to the investor that is okay to give you that money, but no one owes you anything, you know. And this is something that I say to my team very often, because as I said, I built my team based on international, even though I'm living in Poland, and I was convincing people from Syria, Kazakhstan, Georgia, whatever, right? As long as they had the determination, the profile, and a piece of the skill to join us, right? And when they come here, right, they have to seize the opportunity, right, and make something out of it, right? So this is an innovative way for them to start their career, right? A guy coming from Kazakhstan or a lady coming from Kazakhstan and starting her full stack development journey in Poland, Warsaw, that's an innovation, right? But at the end of the day, I can only give that opportunity, that key, you know, that bridge. Once she's here, it's up to her to make it happen, right? And so I think that's a message that we have to carry, you know, towards the migrants and the refugees. And that was something that didn't change across the last 3 years. You tell me, Kenny, if my speech has changed, but basically was always that you are your own, you know, hero in this process, right? And so, of course, they are the organization, but at the end of the day, right, everyone has his own issues and his own problems, right? And if I'm an investor and I don't understand you and I don't understand where you come from due to my context and so on, what pushes me to change my mindset and come and give you money? Nothing. And why would I? Right? So potentially it's about bringing in the successful guys that come out, guys or girls, sorry, that come out of this kind of crowd, right? To make it basically more like easier for the next generation, right? And it's a matter of time, but it's a matter of not pitying yourself at some point, right? And being just into the, you know, more no's gets you closer to the final yes that changes everything, right? And so this is how I think about innovation in the migration or job or creation, is that basically you know that you lost already. So why not just try the, you know, the craziest scenario and potentially you will win big, yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really a great point. I believe that struggle always like be the push for you to go for like a milestone, to like kind of let people who went through this pain and the struggle to be easier for them, or be like a kind of more like lead them the way to make it better for them. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective about this, Walid. Well, back to Dalton, and now like more about the venture capitalist point of view. We would like to understand like what factors that might venture capitalists might consider when they invest in a migrant-led startups.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And one of the things we've been spending a lot of time on the last few years is to present refugee-owned businesses as good business cases. There has been a misconception in the marketplace that when you talk about things or use terms such as impact investing and social entrepreneurship, investors look at that as tantamount to charity, and their expectations for return are lower. So we've spent a great deal of time trying to present these enterprises as real business stories that, oh, by the way, just happen to be founded by refugees. And what we've been able to do through that is realize it's an uphill climb. Of course, VC, they're looking for big returns in a short period of time, and that is not always, in fact, it's seldom what refugee entrepreneurs are after. They're looking to restart their lives. They're looking for stability. They're some of the most generous people on this earth because they want to provide better situations for people that are in their situation or similar situations. So it's not traditional venture capital where we're finding investors. We're looking for mission-aligned investors that understand the multiple bottom line approach of investing, not just profit. And I have to tell you, we don't look at profit as evil. Profit is sustainability. Because as my first boss told me, before we can be a good anything else, we have to be a good business first, okay? So being a good business means that you're providing a product or a service that is marketable. And you can take that marketability, make it profitable, and then you reinvest in your company, your employees, your market, whatever it is you're aimed at. So we're finding investors that are more aligned with that idea, profitable businesses that are interested in making positive changes and impacting the people within their circle of influence. That would be employees, that would be customers, that would be the communities where they are located. So traditional VC is very seldom part of the story where we find money. We have to find people that are more mission aligned. They're still serious investors. They still expect returns. They still want to play a role in the company and make sure it's going in the right direction. But going back to Walid's point, we have to help the entrepreneurs realize your cause is great, but business is business, and we have to be a good business first. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of where we are.
It absolutely answered the question. Thank you, Dalton. It's a message for migrant entrepreneurs that to find the investment, you need to find the right investor who is mission aligned, but at the same time you have to have like a good business model, a profitable one. So I totally agree with that. And like again, we'll go to Kenny, also from his experience working with migrant entrepreneurs. What do you think the measures of success that the business could consider beyond like a traditional financial metrics, like and especially we are talking here about social entrepreneurship and migrant entrepreneurship. So in that context, do you see any like maybe a special or particular measure metrics that could be considered?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I wanted to comment on what Dalton says, because I think there are two different sectors. There's entrepreneurship and there's social entrepreneurship, which in my mind are very different. Often social entrepreneurship is not for profit because it's solving stuff that can't be solved through like your typical models. Sometimes they turn into for-profit things, or they open a new market or whatever. And in that sense, it's absolutely true what we often do that's a mistake, I think, is say, oh, because this person's a migrant, particularly if they're darker skin color migrant, which is kind of a racial way of doing it anyway, but we do this and say, then it's a social entrepreneurship. It's like, no, let the person be an entrepreneur. In fact, in the ecosystem accelerator we had, one of the things that we kind of, it was sort of a joke, but it ended up turning into something real. We said sort of the aim in Europe, and again, I talk a lot about Europe because it's probably the most difficult context to be an entrepreneur in, because of all the paperwork and there's a lot of stuff between countries that makes it very difficult. Like if you're a refugee in Germany, you set up a great company that would be wonderful in Stockholm, you can't move to Stockholm because you're stuck in Germany because of the stupid way our the ancient policies run. But in that sense, we'd say, the aim is for a migrant entrepreneur to lose the migrant title, to become just an entrepreneur and part of the system. And then they can choose to use the migrant, like Walid said, he's like, I'm an entrepreneur, but I also happen to be a migrant. You can use it once you're successful if you want or if you don't want, but to access these other things. And I wanted to go to that point because what we found in a number of places, and I think this is what you're talking about too, Dalton, is so often these entrepreneurs are doing really great work, but for the big investors, finding them and vetting them, they don't have the right measures to do that or the right connections. Where there's a lot of really great kind of networking with VCs and traditional entrepreneurs that already have the social network. So that was one of the things, and Walid mentioned this earlier, and we've been approached by a lot of big funders, foundations or companies that want to fund migrant entrepreneurs. They want to make some profit, but it's very mission. They say, we've tried to do this on our own and we failed because we don't know how to vet people. We don't know how to figure it out. Can you bring us together and shape something around that? And actually an organization came out of our ecosystem accelerator called Starting New. I'll put the link in a second, that's working on a bit of that. Because to your point, Ousama, to answer the question, it took a while, Ousama, is that there is a slightly different way of doing business and of thinking of things and presenting them, and a slightly different curve of entrepreneurship with especially first generation migrant or refugee entrepreneurs than with others. And I think that has to be measured and kind of quantified. And I don't know if you agree with this, Dalton. I think it's a bit of that mission thing. It's like, this will work, it'll become a great business, but it's not the exact same metrics of, your Harvard graduate that has all these rich people in their dad's, network or whatever. It's going to require something a little different. And it may be feeding 6 families from day one on the same salary that the Harvard graduate would just feed himself. So that's actually a factor. This is true because it's always a social entrepreneurship in the sense that they tend to be feeding more things. Like I have a good friend, Abdoulaye Fall, who he's from Senegal, but raised in Spain and moved to Spain and is doing some really great work with entrepreneurs. He said, Kenny, I support 3 economies, so I work 3 times as much as other people because I have to support these 3 economies. I don't have an option. And I think that shapes a bit of how the business runs and how certain things run as well. So there's some of these factors. I don't have an answer to them, but I think drawing some of that else could help us as we're connecting these big funders with these entrepreneurs and also creating those spaces for that to happen, because it's very difficult. Like there's so many social barriers to connect these big funders with the entrepreneurs because they live in practically different worlds. And I think that's a really important thing. And I think some of us here are working on that. I don't know if that answered exactly, but it gave you some of the thoughts that we've been playing with. I'll drop that link in too.
Thank you so much, Kenny. And
if you would allow me, Ousama, just to bounce on this, on what Dalton said and what Kenny said, and I can read as well through the chat here. And I think the first time I used migrant entrepreneur is when I was invited by Ashoka, right? Never in my life it came to my mind that I was a migrant something, right? I was something after the migrant, but not the migrant part, right? And I think this is something that comes, to all of us, right? At any moment, you want to be diminished by a situation that you're in, or a movement or a decision you have made in your life, right? You want to be, on a leveled playing field. And all the entrepreneurs I deal with, either via the Founder Institute, via the French Tech, or my, my company or my team, none of them consider themselves as being migrant something afterwards, right? And I think that that also is often it's like social, and I could also read here about Concat as well, Laura, yeah, talking about her business, because basically what I could see was that, you know, she's dealing with refugees, right? And everything that is delivered, and it's even on the LinkedIn page, is delivered and led by refugees. Okay, great statement, right? But at the end of the day, that's a business, right? And any investor that's going to put money in, going to look at the, you know, I have no investor ever that put the mission before the revenue. Even if their mission is super important to them, right? They would rather invest in something that is profitable than go towards something that is within the mission, right? But not that profitable, right? And I think that we have to bring back, you know, that education to how do we perceive us, right? People that can make a change, that have a certain level, right? How do we perceive those people that are looking for a job, or the businesses that we're supporting, and so on and so forth, right? And get rid of that stigma. I understand that we have to create those silos, right? To be able to target, you know, the people and help them, but I'm not sure it helps on the overall, right? And it's much better to focus on the real things. The real things is, how much money did you make with your business, right? What are you trying to solve as a problem? Is it really a problem, right? What skills do you bring to the table? No matter what the mission is behind, right? But we have to talk about the concrete things, and we often lose ourselves into the big mission. And it's the same when I have you know, young entrepreneurs coming to me from the French tech, because they think, you know, we have a lot of money and we're going to invest and so on. And they come pitch me their idea, and what they say is like, but you know, in 5-6 years with that money, I would have developed this and this and this and this, right? So basically everything that is annexed to their first mission as an entrepreneur. And I'm like, okay, but right now, the base model that you're trying to push, how much money did you make from it? How many people are using it? Yeah, no one, but if you give me the money, I will get it there. That's not how it works. And it's exactly the same way with the entrepreneurs and, you know, migrants and whatnot. Yeah, that doesn't work for anyone. No one buys that. Yeah. So yeah, that's the only thing I wanted to add. Sorry for the passion.
No, never apologize for the passion. It's really adding. I can feel it also, and that's really interesting. I just wanted to ask Laura if you can collaborate on what you added in the chat as well, from your experience, like as a receiver, but also how you deal with this in the team. It's also interesting, like when working in Migration Jam, we have this question, like, what do we label ourselves? Creative migrants? You know, like it's a question, like on how you present your business. So, yeah.
So, definitely. So at Concat, we employ refugee and female developers. We describe it as being led by them, because it actually is. Like, I'm a facilitator in the sense that I registered it in the UK. I pay their salaries in cash because of various obstacles that we have to get over. But it is very much led by them. So I do the sales now, and I bring in people through my network because I have the ability to travel and do all of that. But as soon as the client's on board, it's really over to them, and they're with me from the beginning of the negotiation. They make all the decisions. They decide who works on what client. They decide if they even want to work with the client. All of that is really run from them. I wanted to ask the panel generally, like, we had a big issue at the beginning of basically people coming to us and being like, oh, you employ refugees, female designers and developers, we can pay you $500 then for a website, right? Because it's cheap. And you're like, so our whole part of the thing came about trying to change this narrative. And definitely when you're building a brand and telling a story, right, people, what sets us apart is who our team are and where they are from. But what I think is interesting is from a financial and investor point of view, yeah, what you're saying exactly is right. Like, I loved what you said, never mission before revenue. But then in terms of building a brand and bringing in clients and getting PR and press and all of those things that businesses need, the story is what sells. So for us, we've had a lot of discussions internally and both externally about what comes first. Do we say, we started by telling the story, then we actually came to a point where we're like, we need to commercialize, we need to be, actually the websites are amazing and the design is amazing that we do, not just the fact that we work with refugees. So I think, yes, from the financial side of things, there's that, but I think when building a brand, like, that's what's so important, right? It's the power of the narrative of these stories being at the forefront of the work. And I wondered what you guys thought about that, just in terms of actually the brand side of things.
I spoke a lot already, so it cannot be me now.
we think about building the brand, and one of the things we're trying to accomplish as we talk to of investors and to businesses, and of course the title of the book, The Refugee Advantage. But there is an advantage to being a migrant or a refugee business owner, and I like you guys, I hate titles, I hate labels. You know, someone looks at me immediately and they try to figure out, with this accent at this age, with, you know, as Caucasian, he's probably a ... And it's ridiculous. We do that. It's human. Okay. But what we're trying to do is look at, there are absolute positives that refugee and migrant entrepreneurs bring to the workforce, to the entrepreneurial landscape, that are possible because of the hardships that they faced, you know, and we want to call those out, and we want to make it not a badge of courage, but a reason to invest, not a reason to say no, not a reason to say, oh, we need to bump them down, because no, we need to be thinking about elevating them. What we're finding, we also have a sister organization called Amplio Recruiting, Chris Chancey's organization in Clarkston, Georgia, founded in 2013. It expanded to 20 metro markets, and through the last 11 years, they've placed refugee employees, 25,000 of them, into dignified businesses as employees. As we talk to employers, what we're finding is they prefer these employees for a lot of reasons. The gratitude, the appreciation, the work ethic. It's a positive. It's not a negative. Now, initially, of course, there are barriers. Usually language and culture is just part of it. But we're finding that employers are intentional about overcoming those barriers, and then they have a far better employee. So I believe, Laura, that you know, working to accentuate the positives of refugees and migrants as business owners, as employees, is going to do us far better than to put it on the back burner and make it the last thing we talk about. Yes, I did have to flee my home under the threat of death or persecution, and I have this business. Now, let me tell you why that should be important to you. That's what we want to do. We want to elevate people who've had to do this, and why this makes them better at business than folks who have not faced any kind of adversity like that.
Yeah, and maybe just to add briefly to that, I think, so within Ashoka, we select social entrepreneurs, and it's very social, you know, it's the whole social thing. And I remember when we started realizing, particularly when we ran Hello Europe, that we had a real hard time selecting migrant social entrepreneurs or people from underrepresented backgrounds. And we realized, oh, we're quite a white elite organization. You know, that realization a lot of organizations have had. And at the beginning, you start kind of with compassion, like, oh, we should do more of this. And then we're like, hold on, no. That, first of all, compassion only lasts for a little while, and then it kind of runs out. But secondly, as we start looking back to our roots, we realize what we're looking for is innovation. The top innovators able to bring solutions to the world's biggest problems. And two things happen there. One, the people closest to the issues are the best at solving them, hands down. There's an article in the social, what's it called? Stanford Social Innovation Review on proximate leaders, which is I think it's a really helpful term. Some people call leaders with lived experience or whatever, but people close to the problem are better at solving them. That's true. So on the one hand, we need to find the people as close to the issues that they're dealing with. But secondly, as we thought of innovation, I mean, Walid talked about like innovation comes from struggle. I think that's true. But innovation comes from diversity generally. So one way to define innovation is two factors or more that haven't met before encountering each other. That's innovation. That's one way to look at it. And so we started talking about, we need diversity to get the kind of innovation that is required. And I'm saying internally to our organization of do-gooders, you know, we had to convince them that this is a strategic priority for the good of our organization, of society, not because we want to be nice with, you know, whatever kind of people, with migrants or darker skinned people or whatever, you know, being very blunt with you all. And I think that as we started saying that and researching that, we started realizing how true it was. And it's a selling point. Even in our work, is like, that's great to support these other things, but we want to find the people that are deepest in this. Is it more expensive to find people that are deep in the communities? Yeah. Just spend a lot more time. You have to go have tea with a bunch of people that don't answer your emails because they're busy on the street kind of getting shit done, you know? Like it's a lot more expensive to find diverse talent, actually. And to your point, Dalton, it's more expensive to train them in a sense, but the results are so much better because we're actually seeing different kinds of innovation that we would have never seen before. So I think there is that selling point there. And like I've gone to different business school experiences to either teach or just be an alum in certain things or a student. And it's always better when it's a diverse group of people from around the world. You just learn so much more, right? So how come we can't say this and recognize this and charge for this? Because those diverse business schools are more expensive than the ones where you all have the same cookie cutter students. And so I think there's some of these selling points that are actually really helpful, but I really, even from the social sector, like we're a not-for-profit in all its definitions and everything. Compassion doesn't work. It needs to be, you know, finding here's the angle, here's the thing, here's the innovation. And we can't depend just on compassion. Compassion may start you in the organization, but it has to be that selling point. And so I think that storytelling is super important and helpful. And it could even increase the price tag, you know.
Absolutely. Just to add to this, actually, I think like from my experience, it's the first like a selling point, and I definitely could see that like from where you target your customer in the market. But at the same time, bringing this narrative in the marketing messaging or branding messaging, this is the only way to create the kind of like system change in the mindset of the employers. Like when we bring like this narrative that like those people who went through this hardship in their lives, and they like went through the refugee journey or migration journey, and now they bring all these qualities and qualifications to you as an employer. This is the way where we can change this mindset of like, I can't hire a refugee because they are not qualified. They are not qualified enough to do my job with the quality that I want. So absolutely agree, and I think like this is really important to emphasize on, like keep this narrative on beside like also caring about the quality and the selling point that you mentioned. Laura, would you like to add anything to the point?
Yeah, I think just a lot of it is about what Dalton, you said, really about educating employers, but also educating people and linking them together, right? I meet so many incredible people that could be entrepreneurs, that could be CTOs, that could be, you know, running at the top of these companies. And I think still to this day, there's not enough leaders in big kind of, especially corporate businesses that come from marginalized backgrounds, that can really advocate for this change and educate really from a top level on all of these topics that we're discussing, right? Not only about the language that we use down to the job description, but the way that we talk about who we're reaching out to, the way that we talk about how we're diversity, how we even label who we're trying to reach. And I think we still need more companies to lead the way in that, honestly, all around the world.
Absolutely.
If I may, here's the good news. We have enough employers now that they're telling the story of how I see there was a question, how are they overcoming the barriers? Technology is helping with language apps, but it's beyond that. Companies are hiring people that are conversant in other languages and understand different cultures to be liaisons in the business to help with the transition from whatever culture to Western business ideas, okay? They're making accommodations for people of different religions, for prayers on a daily basis, for a different set of holidays. And what they're finding is making their businesses better. One business that manufactures pickles, they have safety issues or safety needs because they're dealing with food, okay, and machinery. So what they found was they needed to rewrite all of their manuals in about 6 different languages, okay? And then they decided, what can we do so that we could communicate our processes where language was not even needed, much like the Lego idea. Do you ever get instructions with a box of Legos? Absolutely not. So how could we put together process improvement where we could work like that? So the end result is they're a better, more efficient business. And that's the good news. It's not us trying to tell employers. Now we have employers sharing their experience with other employers, making a dent. And I think that's why we're starting to turn the corner, albeit slowly, but we're starting to turn the corner.
Yeah, if I may bounce on that, Ousama. Sorry, Ousama. So you had the.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, like I wanted to bounce on what Dalton is saying, but what Laura said as well. Sorry, Kenny, I'm taking you out of the frame on this one. But basically, the first thing was about having a brand, a storytelling around your business, right? What Laura does here, I understand it perfectly as an entrepreneur, right? You are delivering software, you are delivering marketing, whatever services that you are delivering, but basically at some point you have to extract yourself from the masses, right? So having a refugee-led storytelling makes a lot of sense, right? And it's basically, okay, people that are coming to work with you gonna get a great result, okay, but they will also feel that they are doing something good, right? They are empowering that and so on. But I'm sure, Laura, you tell me if I'm wrong, but you would love to make be $100 million a year company and get rid of that refugee word. Yeah, thank you, right? Because this is entrepreneurship, right? You're gonna find your edge, right? The edge here is that they are basically delivering refugee done work, but at the end of the day, if they can take off that refugee, right, and actually just have a normal team of diverse people without having to push on that refugee theme, but keep hiring refugee internally, right? That's the first thing you do, right? But it gives you an edge, right? And here basically is the same thing with the companies that Dalton is talking about, right? Is that here this company that is changing the process is because they understand that this is where their workforce is coming from, right? And therefore they have to be able to have them as efficient as possible throughout that time, right? And then they're gonna make that step to change because it's profitable down the lane, right? The effort has always to come towards a profitability process. There is no company whatsoever that will decide waking up one morning and say, you know what, I'm going to change things and I'm going to change my philosophy because it looks good. No, shareholders are pushing that, right? Business is pushing that. That's what brings that change. So then the story here is to say, okay, how we can show them that it's profitable, not that, oh, it's great for your PR. Because no one cares. At the end of the day, if my company does 10 million and I'm happy with it, or 100 million and I'm happy with it, why would I put it in jeopardy and start, changing my process, changing my communication, changing my philosophy, and potentially drop, what is making me successful, right? So one thing that I would like to keep, and that was the same discussions 10 years ago, was that there is a certain level of pragmatism that we have to keep always, right? If there is a change that is made or a change that is pushed, it's because at the end of the day, on the business world, it has an impact. For me, when I decided to bring people from all over the world to work, is because I was not well funded. And I knew that by bringing to the table the opportunity to come to Europe, support them here, give them the kickoff of their career in Europe, they would actually come and give 100% of what they have and even 200%, be loyal, stay with us, right? And then when it's gonna be, and they would like to give back much quicker than someone that I'm taking from locally, right? Because they would like to try to compensate the effort that we made. So me too, with my migrant background, I had a very interested, idea throughout the process, even though it made a lot of good to a lot of people. And so what I want to say here is that the pragmatism has to win each time. And we have to ask ourselves, the question is that why this company is doing it, or why would it, do that change if we bring it to them, if we're not bringing the numbers at the end of the road and say, this is how impactful it's going to be, not for your PR, but for your P&L. And then that will change the narrative. Yeah. Money changes the narrative all the time.
Yeah, great contribution. Thank you so much, Walid, and totally agree. It's like, of course, like as we mentioned, the narrative about social impact is important, but I think we cannot compromise the numbers or the solid business model behind this narrative. And if that, like, if we like just compromise this, I think that will hamper also the impact after that. So I can see the rationale behind this, but like it's kind of balance between impact and a business as well, and that's why social enterprise concept is like kind of complex, because combining these two like aspects in the business. I think we've got like a 5 minutes. Like I just would like each of you to share like the final thoughts that you would like to pass to the audience. Because like I started from you, Dalton.
Sure. And thanks again for this opportunity. It's been a delight. I've learned a lot and hopefully made some new friends. I do want to say that what I've posted here in the chat that is incumbent upon us is that we have to demonstrate to investors, to government agencies, to employers, the mutual benefit that exists. Going back to Walid's point, it's about, yes, we have to help people understand, businesses, government, whomever, this is a financially good decision. It's also a good decision for the people that you're hiring or you're investing in. There is mutual benefit. And if this is the win-win, this is the Stephen Covey win-win, we have to focus on that, because it's not just a sales pitch, it's absolutely true. It's backed up by great research, new research that's come out. There is a tremendous benefit from employing or investing in migrant and refugee entrepreneurs or employees. And that needs to be our mantra, mutual benefit.
Thank you, Dalton. Kenny, can you share us your final thought?
Yeah, I mean, I love that, the mutuality. That was a term we explored this last year that I think is so key, because like on the one hand, we know, we actually have the statistics, we have the stories, we know that migration talent is key. And indeed, the world system is, whether it's not necessarily a good system, but it's forcing people to move to find jobs, and those jobs are available. To like, the factors are happening, but there is such a strange narrative kind of in the air that is really dangerous. I mean, there's obviously the evil narrative, right, of like migrants are a threat or whatever, and that's a real thing. But even the good narrative is so fluffy. You know, it's like, oh, these poor migrants, they need our help. They need human rights. And it's like, yeah, yes, we need human rights. Yes, there is help, but we need to stop saying that stuff. You know, and part of it's because it's a lot of non-migrants that are telling the story, right? And we see them as like, these poor little things. No, like we need to stop doing that, but also to show that mutuality. So it's something we need to explore and do better. I'm not sure we're doing it great. I don't think statistics necessarily help, but it's telling the stories behind those statistics, because the statistics are there, and bringing those to policymakers and stuff. Like a friend of mine, Gonzalo Fanjul, who leads Por Causa, which is an organization that works with journalists and storytelling and stuff around migrants, said, what we need is to change the narrative in the public policy or politics, you know, enough so that a lot of government stuff can actually put into practice policies that they know would work, whether it's left or right or middle. They know this stuff works, but they don't have like the buffer around them to build it. And one example is like in Spain, our Minister of Work and migration's within the work department, which is interesting, passed some really soft laws, but just these small things to legalize like a number of migrants, like we're in the hundreds or thousands maybe, but not a lot. And the syndicates and everyone got super mad at him and said, you did this in secret and at night because, you know, you're evil. It's like, shit, I'm giving you guys more workers. Like, this is what you want. But the narrative is just so tense and so negative that even when people do good things, they don't have that space. So I think telling these stories, changing the narrative, that mutuality aspect is something we really need to work on, and kind of really put our effort into.
Thank you so much, Kenny. We've got like 1-2 minutes for you, Walid, to share your final thoughts.
Appreciate it. Thank you. I don't know if I have any final thoughts, but I mean, what you guys have said is already brilliant, and I don't think I would add anything smarter than this to the, you know, to the pot. The only thing I would like to say here is it's a feeling, right? Be unapologetic, right? You are a refugee, you are migrant, whomever the hell you are, yeah? You are basically working for yourself, you're working for your family, you know, and whomever is on your way, you know, I mean, if they are creating barriers, they have to be crushed. That's the process. And that's the only way to go forward, because when you are in that, you are putting that barrier on yourself, saying that, oh, I need an external hand, to come and, lead me toward, beyond this hurdle or this problem or whatnot. You are basically giving, that power of movement that you have within yourself to someone else external to come save you, right? And that's what makes that narrative of the poor migrant and the poor refugee. At the end of the day, that's a male or a female with a brain and hopefully 2 arms and 2 legs, right? Being able to comprehend the world around them, right? And basically that have to push through for the best that they would get in that context that they are in, right? And I think this is something that we often forget to give that power, to those migrants and refugees, telling them that, that you have a voice, you are able to express yourself and just say, F it, right? I'm not okay with that. And I want to go that way and I want to do it my own way. And that's basically, I believe, much more empowering than any, Red Cross or whatnot program, because people then don't feel to disturb your process. One thing that I learned when I was in Poland, when I moved in, right, was that if I'm, going straight forward, right, and basically making it very clear that anyone that comes my way might lose an arm into the process, right? No one will come my way, right? But you have to make it consciously. It's a mental process. It's an effort, but it's that anyone that will come in front will get crushed, and that has to be expressed. And if we bring that attitude, it's a little bit of a Rambo attitude, right? Like, I'm gonna kill everyone, but at the end of the day, on the long run, you make your space, because people are afraid, to bully, strong people. But when you show weakness, that's a door of entrance for anyone else to mistreat you. And this is not what you want for people that are already in a tough situation, that can be refugees or migrant that didn't decide to make that move, right? So I would say just, be your own hero, right? Just keep pushing and don't allow anyone to stop you.
Well, so be your own hero. Thank you so much, Walid, for this. I have like a Fadi hands like up. So if you would like to share anything at the end of.
Thanks. It's really just it's been really great input and insight. Literally brilliant, as Walid said, from everybody. Agree completely. Just on the story and the narrative and the story of the success of the migrants, it's really interesting. It just crossed my mind. There is also within the migrant, the successful. There are a couple of people came to mind. Elon Musk is a migrant. And Elon Musk struggled with visa, to come in the US and all of that, it's just a little bit, comparatively, but to some extent, he's definitely a migrant. He's someone who's changed the entire, auto industry. Yesterday there was a, tweet, 2 rocket landing. It just like, I don't know, this is like Photoshop hack. It looks unreal to see rockets coming back from the sky, standing down. Like the guy is brilliantly changing things massively. Here's a success. This guy no longer talks about anything relating to the fact of migrant. That's really interesting. The other one in that space also, Jensen Huang, the founder of NVIDIA, he's also originally, Taiwanese guy. And his thought is, the journey is very long from where Walid and Ousama are right now, and the time they become Jensen and Elon, they may be another 20 years. But in this path at the time, like, how do we make sure people don't lose that identity and communicate that message? What would it take to have an Elon or a Jensen to bring up the fact that, yes, I'm an immigrant, and I remember, being a foreigner in a strange land as a kid or whatever it was, or as an adult. And those could be most impactful, interesting point to really make echo on a larger scale. It's just a thought experiment I just had. Thought I would, because of the question that you asked, Ousama. So thanks for letting me in.
Thank you so much, Fadi. That's really important. Like we saw a lot of immigrants, like from the 3rd generation, who were very successful, but everybody forget they are immigrants, and then they will speak about this like anti-immigration settlement, which is like becoming popular with time. So thank you so much for your contribution. I think this is the end of our panel. My last thought about this that I'd like to share from like what our panel said, that's remind me of like a kind of saying like from John Gardner. I remember I read it once. It says the way to change or to solve social problems is to make them your own personal problems. So I think like migrants with the pain and experience that they had, they are the best people to solve these problems. All what they need is the support that like should be given to them, be it knowledge, be it fund, be it investment, be it experience, advocacy, whatever it needs. But this is the only way to solve this problem. Thank you so much, everyone, for contributing to this panel, and I will move it to Laura for fireside chat with Fadi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ousama.
Thank you.
Everybody. Thank you, everybody, as well.
Thank you, Ousama. It was great.
Thank you.
Hi, Fadi. Welcome to the fireside. Maybe you can just start by telling, I mean, you don't really need any introduction, but please, for anyone that might not know you, please just tell us a bit about what you've been doing and how you got into refugee entrepreneurship.
So I'm originally from Syria as well, and moved to the States in 1986, and started a couple of businesses, and then I was working, building teams. Speaking of NVIDIA, in 1995, I moved to Silicon Valley and got into recruiting and headhunting business. And the first assignment I got was to find a design verification engineer for a small startup called NVIDIA. At the time, there were 18 people. Literally, it was like the largest company in the world last week. Amazing to see this. So fortunately, I landed in Silicon Valley and witnessed the growth and the change of technology. And then in 2011, I worked with many startups, built many of their teams, and several of them have become successful. In 2011, I founded Blackbox to help share that kind of mindset with what I thought then was the explosion of the entrepreneurship movement globally. And it was happening everywhere. But Silicon Valley has a little bit of a monopoly on it because the ecosystem and the connections. So we're trying to kind of spread Silicon Valley globally. We ran residential program called Blackbox Connect, where we brought 15 founders or so from 15 different countries to live together in a house for 2 weeks. And I'd invite some of those founders I've worked with before who've grown and built successful businesses. And it was pretty impactful, effective program to change the mindset, which was also mentioned before, to change the mindset of international entrepreneurs to think much bigger in their possibilities and achieve more. It was quite effective program. We ran it 25 cycles with 400 and some entrepreneurs from more than 60 countries and 40% women founders. We've had more than 90% of the companies who've come to the program continue to grow. We've had more than 32, some more exits, over $1.25 billion in liquidations. And we were a not-for-profit. We were not, we were operating as a program to change and share this mindset. So fortunate to have, participated a little bit in some of those successes, but it's the impact that we were making globally on the mindset of changing these founders and helping them continue to spread this kind of ethos that they've learned in Silicon Valley was quite effective. In 2018, I came to speak to Syrian refugees in Lebanon and Turkey, and it was a really moving moment for me. Felt like I needed to give back more, and that was a little bit of the connection with the refugee issue. And it became very clear to me two things at the time, that the challenge for the refugees. So talent, I've also demonstrated that talent is globally distributed. It was the opportunity that was kind of monopolized in Silicon Valley. So there are definitely talented people amongst all of us, no matter what their background and situation. So amongst the refugees, there are certain people who are very talented. Like, how do we empower them to achieve their impact and their potential? And that was the thought that, you know, two things that needed to be solved for is one of the issue was the identity issue that they have, like the limitation that they may have because of their refugee status, and potential access to broader markets. And that was the opening of how do we start to solve for these high potential refugee founders and help them, you know, thrive. And the last 4 years or so since COVID, we've stopped the programs in Silicon Valley, and then I moved to closer to the region and consulted with various NGOs to help also to build capacity and impact for the incubators and accelerators in the Middle East. It was also my opportunity to really get on the grounds and meet with founders and understand the challenges of the founders in the regions broadly. The issue with refugees are unique in some couple of the issues that was brought up in many of the panel topics that was brought up. The challenge with the network and the integration that they have in the host countries and the access to finance. So we're kind of relaunching Black Box right now to focus exclusively on the labels are a challenge where we're calling forcibly displaced and no refugee or any, you know, anybody in the right mind says I'm a forcibly displaced or I'm a refugee. Those are like the secondary, third type of, labels that people, but it's that those types of demographics, it's like, how do we help solve for their legal status and provide funding for them? The way we're looking at it is how do we impact the entire Middle East and North Africa region in terms of as an ecosystem for entrepreneurs from that region, is focusing on the entrepreneur being the center of it, is like a three kind of main constituents. The founders are the main foundation of this. Like, how do we empower founders with programs and connections and resources? How do we empower the organizations that support the founders, the incubators and accelerators or innovation support organizations? And the third element is the investment element. And we're also in the process of raising a fund to also invest in some of those. We've done some, you know, a little bit of connections and investment, but we're trying to formalize that to do programs right now to address these three issues in the region.
Amazing. So you've come from every angle, public, private, NGO, investment side. Let me know when you're next back in Lebanon, for sure.
Yeah.
I guess for me, out of all of the things that we discussed on the panel, I wonder what you think is kind of the overriding solution that's needed. I guess Black Box is essentially about the network, right? Do you think that through that as a solution, that can solve a lot of the issues, whether it's around finance or training or upskilling, whatever that is? Do you believe in that as the solution?
I think what was discussed in the panel and brought up several times, the core issue here, or the key piece is literally reside in one thing, which is the narrative and the storytelling. And it's not an easy thing in terms of like there is a simple storytelling, because there are multiple stages, multiple perspectives on where you're at as a, you know, in a refugee camp versus an immigrant. So my theory is, you know, we know, and it's demonstrated by a lot of data, that immigrants are economy builders. You know, we've just mentioned a couple of examples, but there are a lot of study shows a lot of the founders in biggest companies, more than half of them come from first or second generation. They're either immigrant or second generation immigrants. So what's obvious to me is also from my own personal story is refugee in essence really are immigrant in transition. So I left Syria after when I was 19-year-old. I spent there was a civil war in my hometown in Hama, and my parents were like, we need to get out. So we weren't necessarily not under the duress of the civil, you know, it was 2 years later and after things calmed down, but it was clear like there is a potential, a better opportunity to pursue, we can afford to send you abroad to the US, and I came to the US. So I've always thought of myself as migrant, as an immigrant. But in essence, if this hasn't happened, I would have probably chosen to stay if Syria was like a peaceful, nice country without the challenge that has been happening in the last, you know, 50 years or more. But the issue is like people, escape for various reasons. And when it's extreme, like we have, very sad examples going in front of us right now, it's really, shocking that people just escaping with their life. But this whole thing is immigrants, after they basically integrate, refugees, after they basically integrate, they become immigrant and migrant, and then they drop this entire thing and they become part of this Jensen Huang. I was just looking up, he's an American founder. Well, but then he was 5-year-old when he immigrated, but they dropped the whole thing. It's eventually they become an asset to the country. So how do we build a narrative to show that migrant and refugees are an asset class instead of a liability? And how do we view them and view policy and programs for countries to compete for those for this demographics? Because they're brilliant people from country X that their country is burning, but we're fortunate if they could come to us and we give them a process to integrate, and because in 20 years some of them they could be really changing our countries. So it's building the narrative and shifting from this whole thing of a pity and impact and empathy. It's great to have empathy and compassion, but then the challenge needs to be on a much broader perspective. It's like, so how do we tell the story in a way that achieve that solve for that? Because the migration and immigrant and refugee crisis is a globally exponentially growing crisis for various reasons, including the climate. So how do we provide for that to be a solution and a competitive environment in a global market versus us and them and a divisive frame that a lot of politicians use to perpetuate fear. And that's the story that needs to be compact. So it's like a multi-level approach, but it's all in a narrative, and the results show themselves for the reason that you guys discussed in the panel.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think this concept of them and us is something that's, like getting worse, actually, especially in Europe at the moment. So I guess my final question is, how do we ensure that more migrants or refugees are at the forefront of these conversations, particularly in terms of the labor markets? How do we do that basically at scale? Is it through more initiatives like Black Box? Is it more awareness? Is it through changing perspectives? Is it having the control of the narrative in the media? I mean, there's lots of ways to do it, obviously, but just have some of your insight in that.
It definitely takes education. I mean, there was the point was very well made also in these discussions about the diversity point. So refugees companies about the fact that people with disabilities, they adapt to the world with a creative ways. The same way migrant and refugees, they have to adapt to integrate. The process of adaptation is a process of creativity and process of resilience. So you bring in these virtues to these companies, and then you look at the data, as it was mentioned, there was always those make better employees. There is the gratitude that also was Dalton mentioned. It's like those are the elements, the basic, most important human elements that really foundationals for creating anything good. And the refugees, the resilience that they've gone through, this is a good thing. So it's an education. Resilience is needed in building in any company, as Walid needed, handling 3 businesses, but you've got to go forward and you've gone through things before where the challenge of business becomes smaller, but it's exercising those kind of virtues and emphasizing on those stories it takes education, and it takes an interest of, how do we tell those types of narratives need to be probably on a policy level, on a countrywide levels. So I don't know how much of that is being discussed in policy level, but unfortunately I hear a lot more. It's the opposite, is the fear of immigrants and building walls. So there's something that economically nonsensical. Like, we could have a very capitalist conversation here, like this produce more profit if we really bring people to more communicate, diversity. So education could start. We were educating on a, I go and present to some companies about the people with handicap, various handicaps or physical disabilities or whatever, and that might be so. So it takes efforts on multiple levels, and we need to educate the masses. We need to educate corporate, and we need to change that narrative.
Definitely.
I mean, that's the fortunate things. I mean, we're trying to do what we could do, but it's the other things that also I think Ousama pointed out to is it's key important not just to prove the point to the employers to hire refugees and immigrants. When you have a successful cases of immigrant employee or immigrant founder, they have huge multiplier effects on other immigrants and other founders. And the inspirational, that's the most effective way to shift the frame and let someone who is devastated by the losses that they may have had with their families and the loved one and their country or city or wherever they've lost their properties, to start to see hope, like I could do this too, instead of going also a different direction. So I think the impact of affecting other migrants and other refugees to reach out onto that path is important storytelling, and that's role modeling, and I think that's extremely important. I think we would be probably we would benefit a lot if many of those successful founders who I think probably I have a, I'm sure, I think Walid seems to be the kind who would do it, like demonstrate that you give back to other people, like inspire, encourage the other immigrants who are coming in and others to pursue something, to go for their full potential.
100%. I think there's something also really interesting in this profit for purpose model, right? So at Concat, we describe ourselves, we're registered as a business in the UK, but we use and try to encourage more businesses to look at this profit for purpose model in terms of not just saying, we give X% of our profits each year to training refugees here or there, but actually that the reason for our purpose is actually to create more, like the more money we make at Concat, the more people we can employ, right? The more refugees and women that we can employ. And that is actually part of the whole narrative. So that's super interesting. I think just my one comment about the resilience, which I was actually speaking to Ousama about, is the way that resilience is talked about now, I think, especially in refugee context, is that it is a real positive, right? And generally it is. But on the other hand, not everyone wants to be resilient, right? My team, when people describe them as being resilient, it drives them crazy. They're like, we've been resilient because we have to, because of things out of our control. But we're also so much more than that. You know what I mean? They are like the hardest working people that I know. I have to encourage them to take holiday. If you said that in the UK, I mean, people would laugh in your face. So I think that narrative is also like not speaking about the things that they've been through and the characteristics that they have, and actually using them in a really positive way, but not taking advantage of what they've been through to make it a characteristic, if that makes sense.
100%. I completely agree. And that's exactly what I said in the beginning. It's very hard to tell the narrative in one consistent story that fits every
100%.
piece. That's the thing. It depends on what rooms you're in and who you're talking with and all of that. I mean, when I met with those Syrian refugees in 2018, to me, there was one thing that they just didn't want to be called refugees in the first place then.
Yeah.
And I noticed, and I knew that. It's describing the stories in the right place, but you could help these people and say, when you have other newcomers, when you have other people who are just new immigrant, when you have people who arrive, you could help them because they also struggle and they need a hand to kind of maybe, start running. And, so it's really framing these things appropriately and, it's all context associated and related that needs to be described. And that's what makes it, so it's not just a simple, one narrative of like a like a specific race or some color or something like that you could just boil it down to a smooth tagline or something. It's a more challenging thing than that.
I think also it's about not putting the word refugee as a one type fits all, right? If we're talking about a refugee from Sudan, for example, or from Palestine, they've gone through completely different situations. The visa, wherever they are in the world, is totally different. And I think that's what I think is really particularly difficult when working with refugee and migrant communities, wherever you are in the world, you know, where how we employ people in Lebanon is completely different from how we do it from the UK entity. And I think something that has really shown through my journey at Concat is the amount of effort and education that we as founders and entrepreneurs have to go through before we can even set something up. I must have spent like a year and a half trying to get registered in Lebanon, just because of the bureaucracy of behind it. And that's not even me as a refugee, that's me as a white girl, right? And I'm not even coming in having that. So I think there's also a lot around the narrative of the specifics of the regions that we're talking about. And I think changing that narrative is also really relevant. Like, I speak about Concat in a really different way to a client from, let's say, the Arab world who's working in a company in Dubai, because they already know about the narrative and they already know about the issues the region faces. Whereas if it's just somebody from the UK, for example, who might not have worked with an Arab person before or been to the Middle East, the narrative is different, and you have to give them different reassurances as well, right? Like, we'd have to talk about the reliability of electricity and Wi-Fi, whereas somebody in the Middle East or with a background in the Middle East might already have an awareness about that.
Yeah, I think this is definitely the internally displaced people. There's a lot of people who within their countries that they're also challenged, and then, you know, so it's the frame is the world is really shifting and changing, and there is a need. And right now, because of the ability of sharing knowledge and resources has been and communications become easier, it's unfair, and people are more, you know, have more effort to participate and help mobilize all of this and solve it. And the solution is not always, I mean, profit is important, and every business needs to be profitable and sustainable. By far, that's a key thing. But the model also of like the biggest profit is the most important thing. That's also, you know, it's like a not necessarily what I see that the good thing is this, in this new generation, there are a lot of people who are looking also beyond just the profit, and on solving for the right reasons, and feeling that they're making it, you know, a level of impact and change and affecting lives and doing it. So it's we're evolving, and there's a lot of challenges in many of these third world countries. I'm right now in Tunisia. I've recently kind of relocated and I've been spending most of my time here. And these bureaucracies are like mind-boggling in terms of like, why do you need to have these kind of things? It's simple that you could solve, and everybody would benefit. So it's a great topic. I'm really grateful to Migration Summits to bring in this discussions. I think that's very valuable to shine the lights on these conversations, and it's more of this, and perpetuating these stories and sharing these kind of discussions, and having people engage in it is a very, very important effort. So thanks for bringing us together with that.
Yeah,
it's good. In the beginning, it's like, wow, all of these people see the world from the same place that I could see.
I know, and I think it also can. I mean, it gives me hope, even, and more motivation to keep going. So hopefully it does to everyone else in the audience. I guess we talked a little bit about the future, and I'd love to know what, looking forwards, what are the kind of most interesting emerging trends for you, either in terms of solutions for refugees or refugee kind of led businesses?
I don't know, but I could just sense a little bit. There are issues that needs to be solved related to the identity issue and the movement. I've been participated in some discussions and efforts and initiatives to solve a little bit for that, because it's just like the old process of because people are very limited because of the passport or the identity that they're stuck with, and then it's just not allowing them to really contribute their value. So there are people who are very keen about what they could benefit their countries and others, but they know these limitations. So they're trying to solve for that. So there's something that needs to be solved on the identity. And I'm hopeful with the digital platform where we're at right now with all of the identity verification and all of these things. Of course, there is concerns about privacy. It's complicated, but it's like, how do we allow for more easier movement at least, and the identity management, and allowing people of high potentials to really reach their potential, inspire others like them, and choose the path of like creating value than other paths. And in terms of the other layers of technology, I'm really blown away, like I said, with some of the challenge with some of the like I've came to Silicon Valley in 1992, and at the time it was client server and big, and it was like the internet came, and it's so I've been witnessing like how the abstraction layers every and then the mobile movements, it's like the technology keeps like building on itself. Right now, the AI, and every time it needs to do this, the people first who were programming all the way, creating the microchips and making the microchips and small things. Right now, there are people who are programming pixels on screens. So the pool of people who could learn and contribute to programming things on the screen are much larger. You don't need PhDs in electrical engineering to do that. So everything solved for the layer below it. AI right now, artificial intelligence and the ability. So it's like we're almost past the stage of you need to learn coding. You need to learn how to learn now and interact with the tools. And I think that's what I'm hopeful for, because immigrant and refugees, they quickly identify, as Walid put it, the struggles that they have, and they want to solve for it. When they're empowered with these tools, they could build an app on whatever it is without being programmers themselves, but because they're solving specifically. So I think the future is like how to become more like a product person and learn how to adapt, because the speed of change is really increasing as very fast, exponentially things are changing. So this solutions for refugees, they need to integrate that kind of innovative mindset of how to solve it with, how do we give them access? Once they have access, once the tools become much more freely in their own smartphone and their own laptop, that they could quickly put something together, we could see also solutions. So hopefully, basically riding a little bit on the technology and the communications, that's kind of preferred.
I totally agree with that. We're actually advising quite a few training boot camps, mainly in the Middle East, exactly on that, of like, how do we keep up with the change in programming frameworks, for example, and actually going back to the root of being like, how do we train mindsets to just learn themselves and continuously like adapt, especially if they haven't gone through traditional educational paths, right? Like, it's actually no longer so relevant. Like, we don't look, for example, in our recruitment company, we don't look at whether they've got a degree or a master's like now, because so many of them haven't, or they've been disrupted, especially if they've been on the move. But actually what we test them on is this mindset. We give them problems in their technical test that look at the way that they solve problems rather than what previous experience they've had almost. And I think that is still a very new thing in terms of technical testing, especially for developers in companies. Many companies that we've spoken to are like, what? How do you do that? You know what I mean? So it's also about these things, especially in scalable solutions, keep catching up as well, right? Like, we need companies to fit, we need company processes to fit these kind of new routes as well, so that we can also include different people from basically all over, and irrespective of the education, the traditional education they've had, that we get asked a lot about.
Yeah, if you couple that with also some training on like social and emotional intelligence and
Yeah.
adapt, that, is literally, I think those are the key ingredients for the next generation foundation, to really succeed. And I do think the refugees and migrants come in open to that. I mean, I know, like from myself, when I first came to the US 40 years ago, it was like I'm willing to like there is a discovery stage where my mind is open to accepting things that they're not just coming from a traditional, this is how the message comes. So when that opening happens and then we increase it and encourage it and help people for that, it only benefits to make the world better. I mean, that's really what we need, to be at it from.
Yeah, I love that. And how you can create, I think the challenge that we face is how you can create that scalably and remotely, particularly to not always have to be focusing on like this movement of people as well. Like sometimes they want to have the choice to stay where they are. You know what I mean? Remote work provides them with that opportunity, but really looking at how you teach culture at scalable level, I think is a really interesting problem that a lot of people are going to have to look at solving.
And coming back, I mean, that's what's happened in my case. Just a couple of years ago, I really felt drawn back. I need to move back. I've been 36 years in the US, but it's like there's something more important. So there's something also becomes interesting when you come back from that journey and come home to, how do you give back to these things? So there's people who don't leave, and there's the people who leave and then they could come back. So yeah.
And giving people the freedom to choose, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day. Fadi, I feel like we could talk for hours about this. I can see Ousama's got his hand up. Do you want to add something? Or we go to...
Yeah, I know we run out of time. Just quickly, I wanted to ask Fadi, like about the impact of AI, as you mentioned. So I can see, like from my reading, there are 2 points of view right now about the impact of AI on like talent recruitment. Like either it will empower like those who are in senior levels in businesses, so they can be more productive and they can less dependent on recruiting more talents in their businesses, and that's would like obviously negatively impact the migrant employment. But like from other side also, it might like help those on junior and mid level, so they can be more able to produce and like kind of able to also get more quality jobs and more quality roles. So how do you see this happening in the landscape so far? Which point, or it's combination of both?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely there. We're in time of both, and for a while, but it's almost like it's no longer important for someone to learn how to do JavaScript right now. So but if you say that 15 years ago, I'm wrong, but there was time to do this. So I think we need to look at it from two different, there are people in different environments where they probably still benefit from learning some JavaScript and building some things. But then we need to kind of quickly move beyond that, because things are moving on both dimensions. So it's not either or. It's a period of like, one is going this way, the one going less, and one is getting more. So that's why I don't think like supporting coding schools right now is necessarily the best strategy for impact money to go into to learn coding. Learn how to learn would be a lot more valuable in that case. So AI is just it's just going to be another tool, and how soon that we could learn how to adapt with it. It's definitely how we're going to catch the faster train sooner.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. It's like really important to adopt this change as quickly as possible. Thank you for your insights.
Yeah, it is like the frame and the line is thin in terms of like we need to give people dignified jobs, but the jobs also need to be meaningful. I 15 years ago when I started traveling, I spent a lot of time in Poland. Also, I was coming to Poland, and they were saying, that Microsoft and Intel and whomever is like they have shops in there. And I was all about founders and entrepreneurs. And I was finding like some of the great developers, they've been lost to HP and Microsoft in Poland. They were giving them numbing jobs. They were giving them easy, like their worst type of work. They were putting it necessarily at the time when they were start to out globalization. It wasn't the most innovative jobs until European teams start to become innovative themselves and they acquire them and build on, become the innovation center in some cases. But they were more like taking very talented people and giving them maintenance roles in their career, and they're paid very well, and they have no incentive to become entrepreneurs or something. So this is almost the same with the refugee and the migrants. So it's not just like to give them a job because someone needs to do this dirty work and you're unfortunate, so you're willing, you should do it. So it's like, how do we balance that also? And the refugee and the immigrants are willing to do whatever it takes. Like, I'll do any jobs kind of thing. Yes, I'll do it for $500. I know it's not enough, but I will do. But it's like, how do we motivate that this is just like the first step, just move beyond this and not to build programs because we could do 500 of those people to do this kind of thing. And we think we've made an impact. So the impact organizations, and that's really the economic development and impact organization. It's a very critical to understand really what their role is, the funding that they're giving, how they're perpetuating a lot of activities, and they're not necessarily, they're wasting potential resources, but they're not really hitting also correctly on the highest potential results. They're focusing more on the activities and the optics of this. There's still people from the big World Bank and others, probably supporting things with, code training to learn how to code or something like that.
Right, Fadi, that's super interesting.
Walid,
Yeah, just something you said that intrigued me. You say that you were tired of staying in the US for 36 years and then decided to come back, and to give back, right? Which is a brilliant thing to do, after you have been successful and coming to give back. But how would you incentivize people to do that, right? Because frankly speaking, I'm French Algerian. You wouldn't see me back to Algeria, or even to France for that matter, to be honest, to actually carry on, to upskill and bring towards, if people come to me where I am, then I'm happy to do so. But how would you incentivize that? Because it's hard to, I would say, leave back what you have struggled with for all those years and the status you have built and so on, and say, you know what, I am now Mother Teresa and I'm going to go back and change life for others, which is not the reality of your approach. Yeah, you have been struggling. So at some point you want to enjoy, right? So that's what I'm looking forward. So how do you make this happen? Because not everyone is like you. Yeah. So what would you offer?
Really good question. And I don't think you incentivize it. When it happens, I described it literally like I don't know, it was like an earthquake within me. I felt like I need to go back. It wasn't anybody incentive. I felt when I met with Syrian refugees and college students in Turkey and Lebanon that these people need me. And so it's not a logical choice. You would feel it at certain, and I don't think it's the time. So when the time when the time comes, you would know what you would do it at the time because you would know it. I mean, it just, so it's more like an instinctive stage. And I think it's great for this to do 20, 30 years, but this will be at a time when it's like, so the time calls for it. What I would incentivize for, or what I encourage is the participation of the support externally. I think if you sponsor whatever is like, adopt or mentor some good Algerian refugees, Algerian entrepreneurs, like how do you participate from abroad, from where you're at, from Poland? Like that's like the expat communities, how to help back. So it's not about coming back, but it's like, what can I do here? If you lend a hand to bring someone else to Poland or whatever it is that they need to get out and they do better, do that. And I think that would be value in participating, like maintain that link. That link is important. And that could be very profitable. You could like and connect with like some of the most talent, you know, they will be the founders that you may have invested in the future. So it could be value in, but I wouldn't tell people that, you know, this is my two brothers live in the US and they still in the US and they're older than me and they were there before I came. So it happens for different circumstances, for different people. But it happens to, you know, there is definitely a percentage of a certain percentage of people who either come back more. To me, it's almost, I'm done with the US journey. And there are people who do in between. And I don't know, that might change also in a couple of years. And you miss good systems and things that work and things like that, and stupid bureaucracies and some things. Third world countries, like, you know, what am I doing here? You think of that sometimes, but there are also a lot more of this, you know, heart connections, and there's like ancestral things, like kind of it feels different. So there are people in between who visit, who give back, who come back full time, who come back a few months. But the world should be viewed, you know, I think is looking at this is really like with our connectivity, like the world is small, and this is common to all of us, like how we're all connected. How do we provide for that globally is interesting also to frame, to not to be stuck.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for this. Yeah, because, you know, the idea is all about, you know, it's the coming back that is hard, right? It's not about the help or, you know, doing it from a distance or, you know, opening opportunities. Is really to have that say, okay, I'm going on the ground, and often on the ground is where you make the biggest, you know, changes, right? As you say, and you confront other struggles and so on. So I understand the mindset, but I would say, yeah, if there is any thing that would encourage, you know, people to come back at some point, that are willing, like you, yeah, that have that movement in their head that say, oh, I want to go back, that could be thought about. Yeah, I don't have the answer, but I'm just saying, you know, maybe those third world country government would incentivize somehow, some way, those entrepreneurs to be back, you know, and that would be not only, you know, profitable for their heart, but for their pockets as well, right? It's always easier.
Yeah, you're right. I think if there's an incentive, it needs to be more like a policy driven and economically driven and value driven.
I think that's what we can dream of. If we had that in Lebanon, that would help a lot. But unluckily with the government, I don't think that's going to be such incentives going to be happening anytime soon. Thank you so much, guys. I think we should better wrap up. Otherwise, we're going to be, I feel we literally could talk about this all night. Such a interesting topic. So much to cover. Thank you, Fadi. You are amazing and leading the way for so many more migrants and refugees around the world. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Laura. And thank you, everybody. Yeah, you guys are all amazing, doing fantastic work. And I'm honored to be amongst you today. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Fadi and Laura and the rest of the panel. Walid, great to see you again. Dalton, nice to see you again. And Ousama. This was a fantastic session. As Laura says, this is something that's really close to our hearts. As an entrepreneur myself, as a woman of color, I really related to everything that you said, and so much of what was going on, all the comments and all the and all the discussion. It really was very meaningful for me. So thank you so much for this. For all of you in the audience, thank you for being here. This session is recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel. We have one more interesting session today. Thank you, Suha, for putting that in the chat, around the power, around AI and migration. So join us in half an hour for that session. Thank you all. Have a really wonderful day, and let's continue this discussion. This discussion is something that I think we'll keep having again and again, because as we say, migrants, the data shows that migrants make good entrepreneurs. Migrants are a benefit to the economy. So let's continue the discussion. Hopefully next year in the Migration Summit, we'll have something else. Perhaps we'll have more migrants, female migrants of color in the panel to really share their experiences and talk about the journey. So thank you all. Have a really wonderful day and see you at the next panel, hopefully. Bye now.